Let us execute an immediate, sweeping, analytical vector shift away from small-town cold case abductions, forensic investigation timelines, and coastal resort tracking matrices, and plunge straight into the high-octane, calculation-heavy tracking grids of sudden vehicular trauma isolation, weaponized marital psychological thriller deployment loops, and the fiercely protective, dangerously fragile world of an endangered collection of raw injured civilian assets running a raw tactical survival loop. We are crossing the threshold directly into the hyper-monitored, paranoia-slicked parameters of a scorched, high-density remote highway accident layout, exploring the lethal analytical parameters of a devastating cabin fever-induced deception extraction matrix with The Crash, the exceptional pulse-pounding contemporary thriller and comprehensive post-accident psychological compendium, engineered by the absolute undisputed global sovereign of breathtaking domestic secrets, razor-sharp narrative traps, and high-velocity structural friction, Freida McFadden. This high-stakes narrative tracking sequence delivers an exceptional look at an operational crossroads where an endangered primary injured wife asset running an unyielding truth extraction loop, a calculating manipulative shadow network of a suspicious spouse and remote-setting gaslighting routines, and an absolute defense against an encroaching physical immobility containment zone collide at terminal velocity. Let us map the strategic narrative grid. If you are an elite enthusiast of high-octane, slow-burn creative journeys where endangered, hyper-observant car wreck survivor protagonists must navigate an absolute maze of rigged character perspectives, corrupt medical recovery timelines, and a deadly ring of active personal deadline frame-ups while running a blind survival loop inside a completely compromised domestic ecosystem, where an analytical mind uses deep psychological profiling, calculated bedside boundaries, and absolute emotional stamina to outmaneuver an invisible predatory executioner asset, weaponizing highly advanced marital gaslighting mechanics, and where the author utilizes an incandescent, meticulously paced post-trauma gaslighting incubator tracking a seemingly devoted husband who deploys advanced isolation shields and clandestine medical dossiers to systematically forge a seemingly innocent facade before crossing a terminal exposure milestone diagnostic routine to test our hero's structural limits. This book is engineered to lock you in. McFadden completely dominates the high-precision, unreliable narrator jeopardy meets suffocating narrative erasure puzzles dynamic, capturing the heart-racing intellectual momentum, suffocating blank-page paranoia, and heavy deductive depth popularized by genre-vargs like Gillian Flynn, Lucy Foley, B.A. Paris, and Misery-era Stephen King, while treating realistic baseline terminology logistics, complex dark possessive loyalty arcs, and protective high-density isolation extraction grids with absolute technical mastery. The narrative tracking grid zeroes in on the highly volatile, calculation-heavy baseline of our central legendary powerhouse creative asset, operating under a severe calculation-heavy handicap of a total loss of physical mobility safety networks, absolute structural liquidation logs, and a hyper-visible targeting canvas within a cutthroat isolated marital matrix. Behind our protagonists' rigorous daily footprints, defensive conversational shields, and sharp observation metrics lies an intricate matrix of hidden structural vulnerabilities, deeply buried survival instincts, and sharp high-stakes tactical maneuvers. Her collective defense mechanisms are locked down tight following an abrupt plot outline deviation sequence, her entire analytical focus strictly consumed by monitoring sudden threat vectors from a network of internal distraction forces, parsing complex behavioral shifts in her daily spousal interaction loops, and shielding her vulnerable personal sovereignty note from being entirely wiped out by a ruthless elite domestic offensive. The spark ignites when an unexpected high-frequency structural anomaly breaches her active scanning parameter, While sorting through a series of routine post-accident recovery logs, our primary asset registers a total security breach when her partner's psychological onboarding sequence initializes an irregular descent into active psychological fracturing logs, systematically tracking hidden midnight room movements, forbidden memory coordinates, and unvetted medical record associations, forcing her into a proximity tracking matrix with an oncoming narrative resolution. Behind the recovery world's pristine, smooth aesthetic facade and elite behavioral mapping style lies an intricate matrix of severe ideological warfare and a cold, calculation-heavy target containment blueprint. As the hostile adversarial investigation phases enter an increasingly lethal terminal tier across a ticking clock timeline, the unauthorized discovery of missing historical truth templates, hidden intimate motivations, and altered tracking templates reveals that her entire leisure sanctuary was an explicitly engineered trap. The standard boundaries of routine marital courtesy and peaceful civilian compliance protocols crumble, and our central protagonists run completely out of standard diplomatic escape vectors. She is thrust directly into an active, invisible war behind closed cabin doors, where a highly manipulative psychological gaslighting matrix launches aggressive countermeasures to permanently suppress her survival data stream and execute her complete systemic erasure. The tactical parameters instantly explode as their social and survival war turns completely active, transforming the large family living spaces, dark cabin corridors, and private fortified bedrooms into a volatile psychological pressure cooker and a physical battle zone. Our protective, hyper-vigilant heroine is forced to deploy her massive intuitive tradecraft, elite behavioral mapping skills, and raw physical stamina to preserve her focus before her adversary's relentless calculation-heavy proximity containment phase permanently deletes her boundaries. The threat vector remains purposeful and resolute, shifting dynamically through precise execution guidelines from initial collision aftermath to final structural manuscript release loops, determined to deploy deep sensory manipulation loops, continuous psychological gaslighting via digital distraction maneuvers, and persistent dominance to shatter her defense, only to realize her hardened survival protocols and shifting counter-narratives match their opponent's raw tactical speed step for step. Every midnight archival excavation of personal legal journals, every silent choice to stand off against an electronic apex predator behind standard structural barriers, and every intense moment of channeling raw, unyielding survival mechanics chips away at her reliance on original peaceful rules. What follows is an exceptional, high-stakes war of perspective, tactical position, and raw human grit. We watch the Predator Network's deceptive parameters completely unwrapped as Freida McFadden reveals that the true victory requires more than just surviving an initial week 1 ambush or managing an invasive spousal disclosure. It demands an absolute, uncompromising defense of individual dignity, personal truth, and systemic survival against a cold, calculating machine of domestic manipulation and absolute structural supremacy. While our central characters smooth over each other's psychological and defensive blind spots with devastating analytical force, creating a fiercely protective, absolute web of dark possessive loyalty around their building creative survival alliance, a brutal series of close-quarters tactical confrontations and high-stakes midstream point-of-view shifts switches the clock into its terminal phase, proving that deep-seated obsession has tracked them to their final outpost. To survive the impending locked grid trap and permanently secure her sanctuary, our resilient protagonist must unleash an absolute, unyielding defense of her final boundary lines. It is a high-velocity post-trauma psychological/domestic captivity noir/isolation survival mystery/high-velocity contemporary puzzle masterpiece that treats deep relational logistics and intense structural friction with elite precision. The tension here burns with a sharp, calculation-heavy intensity. We are talking about that high-frequency, one unreliable narrator lie triggers a fatal deadline showdown energy, where a sudden pause during an active franchise tactical briefing, an unexpected shift in an adversary's protective physical posture during a high-stakes standoff confrontation, or a heavy, possessive realization that an elite intelligence operative has completely mapped your personal coordinates, carries massive structural weight. McFadden writes with an exceptionally fresh, vivid, and beautifully blunt voice, perfectly capturing the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of a private executive vault before a major corporate fallout, and the distinct, subtle scent of copper, medical rubbing alcohol, old winter timber, smartphone glare, cold sweat, dark adrenaline, and pure, unadulterated suspense.